Your breath is bad. You know it. Your co-workers know it. The way they lean back half an inch when you talk close. The person next to you on the elevator knows it. And you've been doing the only thing you know how to do. You've been reaching for mouthwash, more rinsing, longer swishing. Maybe you've started carrying a bottle in your bag, swishing every hour, thinking if I just mask it enough, nobody will notice. But 20 minutes later, it's back. It's been coming back for weeks, maybe months. And no matter how much mouthwash you swish, the smell just won't stay gone. I'm going to tell you why, and the reason is going to surprise you. Because your breath isn't bad. Because you're not rinsing enough. Your breath is bad because something specific is happening in your mouth that mouthwash was never designed to fix. Something that no amount of minty rinse, no amount of gum, and no amount of breath mints can actually solve. And the fix is sitting on a shelf in your kitchen right now. Not the pharmacy, not the dentist's office, your kitchen, the cabinet where you keep your baking supplies. It costs about $2, and it can eliminate the source of bad breath in days, not minutes. But I can't just tell you what it is and send you off. Because if you use it wrong, or if your bad breath is coming from something this can't fix, you'll waste your time thinking you tried everything when you never actually address the real problem. I need to show you how to tell the difference before you do anything else. Let me start with a question that's going to change how you think about your own breath. What actually makes breath smell bad? It sounds like an obvious question. Bad breath smells bad because, well, it smells bad. But that's not actually an answer. There are specific molecules responsible for that smell, and understanding them changes everything about how you treat the problem. They're called volatile sulfur compounds, mostly hydrogen sulfide and methyl mercaptan, the same family of compounds responsible for the smell of rotten eggs. You're not imagining a resemblance. It's the same chemical family, just in a much smaller, much more personal concentration. These compounds are produced by anaerobic bacteria living on your tongue, between your teeth, and around your gum line, bacteria that thrive in low oxygen environments and feed on proteins left behind from food particles, dead cells, and mucus. When those bacteria break down that protein material, they release sulfur compounds as a byproduct, and that byproduct is what you and everyone standing near you can smell. So when your breath turns bad, what's actually happening at a microscopic level is that a colony of odor-producing bacteria has built up somewhere in your mouth, usually on the back of your tongue, and it's actively manufacturing sulfur gas. Mouthwash doesn't remove that colony. It kills a portion of the bacteria on contact and masks the smell with mint or alcohol for a short window. But the surviving bacteria regroup within an hour or two, and the smell returns, sometimes worse than before, because alcohol-based mouthwash can actually dry out your mouth, and a dry mouth is the single best environment for odor-producing bacteria to thrive in. Now, why would this bacterial colony build up in the first place? What creates the conditions for it? 3 possible reasons, and only one of them is meaningfully addressed by rinsing with mouthwash. Reason 1. Poor tongue hygiene. The back of the tongue has a rough, textured surface that traps food debris, dead cells and bacteria in a coating you can often see if you stick your tongue out and look in a mirror, a white or yellowish film concentrated toward the back. This is where the overwhelming majority of bad breath actually originates, not from the teeth, not from the stomach, from the tongue. This is the obvious answer once you know to look for it, and almost nobody actually looks. Reason 2. Dry mouth. Saliva is your mouth's natural cleaning system. It washes away food particles, neutralizes acid, and carries oxygen that keeps anaerobic bacteria in check. When your mouth is dry from dehydration, from mouth breathing at night, from certain medications, or from alcohol-based mouthwash itself, ironically, bacteria multiply faster and the sulfur compounds concentrate instead of getting rinsed away. This is why breath is almost always worse. First thing in the morning, hours of reduced saliva production overnight lets the bacteria run unchecked. Reason 3, and this is the one that almost nobody talks about, the one your mouthwash bottle conveniently never mentions, the one the oral care industry has spent decades steering you away from because it threatens an entire aisle of their product line. Oral pH. The bacteria that produce sulfur compounds are anaerobic and they thrive specifically in an acidic environment. Your mouth's natural pH shifts throughout the day based on what you eat and drink, and every time it dips into acidic territory, those bacteria get exactly the conditions they need to multiply and start producing odour. Mouthwash doesn't fix your oral pH. Most commercial mouthwash is itself mildly acidic, which is part of why the fresh feeling fades so fast. You can rinse constantly and still lose the pH battle every single time because you're never actually changing the environment those bacteria depend on. You're just interrupting them for a few minutes. Think about it like this. Imagine your tongue is a garden bed and the bacteria are weeds. Mouthwash is like spraying the leaves of the weeds with water. It knocks a little dust off. It looks better for a minute, but the roots are still there. The soil conditions that let the weeds thrive are still there, and within an hour the weeds look exactly the way they did before you sprayed them. What you actually need is something that changes the soil itself, the pH, the environment, not something that briefly rinses the surface. And here's the part that surprises people every single time I explain it. Oral pH deficiency, meaning a mouth that sits too acidic too often, is one of the most common underlying contributors to chronic bad breath, and almost nobody tests for it or even thinks about it, because the mouthwash industry has spent decades convincing you that fresh breath means you need their specific blue or green liquid in a plastic bottle, and mint does help. It helps you smell better for the length of a conversation. But if the problem is bacterial buildup on your tongue, combined with an acidic oral environment, you're masking the wrong problem with the wrong tool over and over again. I told you this video would change how you think about your own breath. Now let me tell you how to figure out which situation you're actually dealing with, because this is the step that separates someone who actually fixes their breath from someone who keeps buying bottle after bottle of mouthwash and wondering why nothing sticks. Stick your tongue out right now and look at it in a mirror, all the way out, and look specifically at the back third, closest to your throat. If you see a visible white, yellowish, or greyish coating concentrated toward the back, thicker than the rest of the tongue, that's bacterial buildup, and that coating is almost certainly your primary odour source. If your tongue looks relatively clean and pink, but your mouth feels dry, sticky, or cottony, especially first thing in the morning, that's a dry mouth pattern, and hydration and saliva stimulation matter as much as anything else here. If you have persistent bad breath along with bleeding gums when you brush, or gums that look red and swollen rather than a healthy pink, that's a signal the problem may be gum-related rather than purely tongue-related, and that's worth a dental visit rather than a kitchen fix, because ongoing gum inflammation needs professional attention. 3 different patterns, 3 different starting points, and most people have been rinsing with the same mint liquid regardless of which one actually applies to them. If you're watching this and you've been buying mouthwash every few weeks for months or years, and the smell keeps coming back within an hour of rinsing, you almost certainly have a tongue coating and pH problem, and you've probably had it for a long time without realizing what was actually causing it. Drop a comment and tell me, when you look at the back of your tongue right now, is there a visible white or yellow coating? I want to know how many of you have been treating the wrong problem this entire time. Now, the kitchen powder. Let's talk about what it is and why it works better than the liquid sitting in your bathroom cabinet. Baking soda, sodium bicarbonate. The exact same white powder that makes your cookies rise, that sits in the back of your fridge absorbing odours, that's been used as a basic household staple for more than a century. Baking soda is naturally alkaline, and that's the entire key to why it works here in a way that mint and alcohol never could. It doesn't just cover up sulfur compounds with a stronger smell, it directly neutralises the acidic environment those odour-producing bacteria depend on to survive and multiply. Raise the pH in your mouth, even temporarily and repeatedly, and you make it a genuinely hostile environment for the exact bacteria responsible for the smell. A box of baking soda costs about $1.50 to $3 at any grocery store. It's in the baking aisle, not the toothpaste aisle, not the pharmacy, the baking aisle where the flour and sugar live. And this $2 box can address bad breath at its actual source instead of covering it for 20 minutes at a time. Here's the method, and I'm going to give you 2 approaches because different situations call for different levels of intervention. Method 1, the rinse. This is the fast, simple method. Dissolve half a teaspoon of baking soda in half a cup of warm water. Stir until it's completely dissolved, no grit at the bottom of the glass. Swish it around your entire mouth for about 30 seconds, making sure to swish it toward the back of your mouth and tongue, where the bacteria concentrate most heavily. Then spit it out. Do not swallow it regularly. Why warm water? Because baking soda dissolves faster and more completely in warm water, which means a smoother, more even rinse. Cold water works too, it just takes more stirring to fully dissolve. This method works fast because you're directly flooding the bacterial hot zones with an alkaline solution, disrupting their environment within seconds. You'll notice a difference in breath freshness almost immediately, and with repeated use over several days, the underlying bacterial colony itself starts shrinking because the environment keeps getting less hospitable for it. Method 2, the tongue scrape paste. This is the slightly more thorough method, and honestly, if your tongue has a visible coating, this is the one that actually solves the root cause instead of just rinsing around it. Make a thick paste using half a teaspoon of baking soda and just a few drops of water, thick enough to sit on a toothbrush without dripping off. Using a soft bristled toothbrush or a dedicated tongue scraper, if you have one, gently brush or scrape the surface of your tongue, working from the back toward the front in short strokes, focusing on the area where the coating is thickest. Rinse your mouth thoroughly afterward with plain water. This method physically removes the bacterial film instead of only neutralizing the environment around it, which is why it tends to produce a more lasting result, especially for people whose main issue is that visible tongue coating. Which method should you use? If your breath problem is mild and mostly related to acidic buildup after meals, the rinse alone, used a couple of times a day, will make a noticeable difference within a few days. If you saw a real coating on the back of your tongue during the mirror check earlier, use the tongue scrape paste once a day, ideally in the morning when the coating is thickest after a full night of reduced saliva flow, and use the simple rinse as a midday or after-meal touch-up. If you want the most complete result, do the tongue scrape paste in the morning and the rinse again in the evening. Now let me talk about something I think most videos on this topic skip entirely, and it's the reason some of you are going to be annoyed with me by the end of this, but I'd rather be straightforward with you than have you disappointed a week from now. Baking soda is not a miracle cure for every case of bad breath, and a lot of the hype floating around online about it, fixing everything instantly, is exaggerated. Here's the honest version. Baking soda works extremely well when your bad breath is coming from tongue bacteria and oral acidity, and for the overwhelming majority of people, that is exactly where chronic bad breath comes from. But if your bad breath is tied to ongoing gum disease, an untreated cavity, a sinus infection, or chronic postnasal drip, certain digestive conditions, or dry mouth caused by a medication you're taking, baking soda rinses and tongue scraping will help somewhat by reducing the surface bacteria, but they won't fully resolve the underlying cause, because the underlying cause isn't sitting on your tongue, it's somewhere baking soda physically cannot reach. This is why the mirror check matters so much. Bleeding or swollen gums, a bad taste that seems to come from your throat, or sinuses rather than your mouth, or bad breath that persists even with a visibly clean tongue and consistent use of this method for more than 2 weeks, those are all signs. It's time to talk to a dentist or a doctor rather than keep experimenting at home. I would rather you diagnose this correctly and either fix it yourself for $2 or get pointed toward the right kind of help than have you keep swishing baking soda for a month waiting for a result that was never going to come because the actual source was somewhere else the whole time. For those of you who did the mirror check and saw that coating, or who know your main issue is that heavy sour taste that builds up after meals, let me tell you what to expect over the first 2 weeks. Day 1, immediately after your first rinse or scrape, you'll notice a cleaner, less sour taste in your mouth, and breath that smells noticeably better for longer than it would after mouthwash, often 2 to 3 hours instead of 20 minutes. Days 2 through 4, if you're using the tongue scrape method daily, you'll start to see the visible coating on your tongue, thinning out, less white, less yellow, more of your tongue's natural pink showing through, especially toward the back. Days 4 through 7, this is where people start noticing something different. Morning breath specifically starts improving. That heavy, unpleasant taste and smell you wake up with becomes noticeably milder because the bacterial colony that builds up overnight has less established territory to work with each day. You keep the tongue cleaner and the pH higher. Days 7 through 14, with consistent daily use, most people report their partner, a close friend, or a coworker mentioning unprompted that their breath seems better, which, if you know anything about how rarely people volunteer that kind of feedback, tells you the change is real and noticeable, not just something you're convincing yourself of. Picture this. Someone has been carrying a bottle of mouthwash in their bag and their car for over a year, swishing before every meeting, every date, every conversation where they're standing close to someone, and still catching themselves worrying about it constantly. They've tried 3 different brands of mouthwash, the strong blue kind, the gentle alcohol-free kind, the whitening kind, spending close to $60 over that year on bottle after bottle, and the anxiety never actually goes away because the relief only ever lasts 20 or 30 minutes before that same sour, heavy feeling creeps back in. Frustrated, they finally check the back of their tongue in a mirror for the first time and see exactly the kind of pale yellow coating described earlier, something they'd genuinely never noticed before because nobody had ever told them to look. They start the baking soda tongue scrape every morning and the simple rinse after lunch. Nothing complicated, about 90 seconds total added to a routine they already had. Within the first week, the coating is visibly thinner. By the second week, that constant background worry about their breath fades because the smell simply isn't building up the way it used to, even hours after eating. Total cost, a small fraction of a $2 box of baking soda already sitting in the pantry for baking. That's the entire story, and some version of it plays out in comment sections under videos like this every single week. Real people, a $2 kitchen ingredient, and 2 minutes a day against $60 a year of temporary mint-flavoured relief that was never actually solving anything. Now let me give you some warnings because I want this to genuinely help you and I want you to do it safely. Warning 1. Don't overdo the frequency. Baking soda is mildly abrasive when used as a scrape paste, and using it aggressively multiple times a day on your tongue or teeth, day after day, with no break, can irritate soft tissue over time. Once or twice a day for the rinse, once a day for the tongue scrape, is the effective, safe range. Warning 2. Be gentle when scraping your tongue. The back of the tongue can trigger a gag reflex, and pressing hard doesn't clean any better than a light touch does. It just makes the experience unpleasant and can irritate the tissue. Light pressure, short strokes, working from back to front. Warning 3. If you have any open sores, ulcers, or recent dental work in your mouth, skip the scraping method until it's fully healed and stick to the gentle rinse only, or check with a dentist first. Warning 4. This method is not a substitute for regular brushing, flossing, and dental checkups. Tongue bacteria is one major contributor to bad breath, but plaque between your teeth and along your gum line is another, and no rinse replaces mechanical cleaning with a toothbrush and floss. Warning 5. If you notice your bad breath persisting for more than 2 to 3 weeks of consistent, correct use, or if it's accompanied by bleeding gums, mouth pain, or a bitter, metallic taste that doesn't go away, that's the point to see a dentist or doctor rather than keep adjusting the home routine, because those symptoms point towards something baking soda alone was never designed to fix. Let me give you a simple daily structure you can actually stick to, because a routine works far better than remembering to do something occasionally when you happen to think of it. Morning, right after waking up, before breakfast, do the tongue scrape paste, about 30 seconds, then rinse with plain water and brush your teeth as normal afterward. Midday, after lunch, especially if you ate something with garlic, onion, coffee, or anything strongly acidic, do the quick baking soda rinse. 30 seconds, spit, done. Evening, after your last meal of the day, brush and floss as normal, and if your tongue is showing any coating again by evening, a second quick rinse before bed helps keep the overnight bacterial build-up lower, which means noticeably better breath the moment you wake up, instead of that heavy first thing in the morning smell everyone dreads. That's the entire system, roughly 2 minutes a day, split across 3 small moments, costing pennies, against a mouthwash habit that costs several dollars a bottle and only buys you 20 minutes of relief at a time. One more thing before I let you go, and I think it might be the most important point in this entire video. Baking soda addresses the bacteria and the acidity that are already present, but it doesn't prevent new build-up from happening again. If you're chronically dehydrated, breathing through your mouth at night, eating a lot of sugar and processed food that feeds those same bacteria, or skipping regular brushing and flossing, new odor-producing build-up will keep forming regardless of how well you rinse and scrape, because those are the actual conditions that let the problem return. Staying hydrated throughout the day keeps saliva flow strong, which is your mouth's natural defense system working the way it's supposed to. Cutting back on sugary drinks and snacks reduces the fuel those bacteria feed on in the first place, and keeping up with regular brushing, flossing, and dental visits closes the gaps a tongue routine alone can't cover. That's really the bigger picture here, layer by layer, small habit by small habit, a routine that costs almost nothing and does more for your confidence in a conversation than a drawer full of half-used mouthwash bottles ever did. If you found this useful, let me know in the comments what you found when you checked the back of your tongue, and whether the rinse or the scrape paste made a noticeable difference for you after a few days. I read through these regularly, and I'm curious how many of you have been dealing with the tongue coating pattern versus the dry mouth pattern versus something that sounds like it needs an actual dental visit instead of a kitchen fix. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. It reflects my own personal opinions and observations based on things I have come across on YouTube, Google, and various news sources, and it is not medical, dental, or professional advice of any kind. I am not a dentist, doctor, or any kind of licensed professional, and nothing in this video should be taken as a diagnosis, treatment plan, or a substitute for advice from a qualified medical or dental professional. Everyone's mouth, health history, and underlying causes of bad breath are different, and what works for one person may not be appropriate or sufficient for another. Please consult a licensed dentist or doctor before relying on any home routine to address bad breath, especially if it persists, worsens, or is accompanied by pain, bleeding, or other symptoms, since those can sometimes point to an underlying condition that needs proper medical attention rather than a home remedy.